The summer of 2001. In New York City, it was the end of an era, though no one knew it yet. The dot-com bubble had burst, but the city's relentless energy remained undimmed. It was a time of deceptive tranquility, a metropolis humming with the familiar rhythms of commerce and life, unaware it was standing on the precipice of history. At the heart of this concrete and glass landscape stood two titans of architecture, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. They were more than just buildings, they were a symbol of American economic power, a landmark recognized across the globe. A vertical city, home to 50,000 workers and host to 200,000 daily visitors. For decades they had defined the skyline of Lower Manhattan, a testament to engineering and ambition, but they had also proven to be a target. The 1993 bombing in the North Tower's parking garage was a stark reminder of their symbolic vulnerability, a violent prologue to a story no one was prepared to read. The towers were owned and operated by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, a bi-state agency created to manage the region's transportation and commerce infrastructure. But by the turn of the millennium, the agency was eager to divest from its role as a commercial landlord. The sprawling complex was aging, requiring immense capital for maintenance and upgrades. The Port Authority wanted to refocus on its core mission: bridges, tunnels, and airports. Privatizing the World Trade Center, they argued, would return a vital piece of real estate to the city's tax rolls and inject billions into public infrastructure. In the year 2000, they officially put the world's most famous office complex up for a 99-year lease. The prize was immense, and the competition was fierce. Enter Larry Silverstein, a quintessential New York real estate magnate born in Brooklyn who had spent a lifetime transforming the city's skyline. Starting with a single building in the 1950s, Silverstein Properties had become a dominant force in the market. Silverstein was sharp, tenacious, and possessed an unshakable belief in the future of Lower Manhattan. He had already developed 7 World Trade Center, a 47-story tower adjacent to the main complex, and his ambition was clear. For him, the Twin Towers were not just another deal, they were the ultimate prize, the capstone of a long and storied career. He had dreamed of controlling the complex for years. In an interview, he would later recall his passion for the project, stating, "For me, the World Trade Center was a passion. I saw it as a phenomenal opportunity to really take a city within a city and bring it into the 21st century." But he wasn't the only one with this dream. The bidding war for the lease was a high-stakes battle of titans. His primary rival was Vornado Realty Trust, another real estate giant led by the formidable Stephen Roth. The initial bids were staggering, but Vornado's offer of $3.25 billion edged out Silverstein's. For a moment, it seemed his dream had slipped away. The Port Authority entered into exclusive negotiations with Vornado. But in the complex world of New York real estate, a deal is never done until the ink is dry. Vornado's negotiations faltered over last-minute demands, and in a dramatic turn of events, the door swung open once more for Larry Silverstein. He seized the opportunity, matching the offer and finalizing the terms with astonishing speed. On July 24, 2001, just 7 weeks before the world would change forever, the deal was done. Larry Silverstein, at 70 years old, signed a 99-year lease for the World Trade Center. The price, $3.2 billion, the largest real estate transaction in New York City's history. He put down just $14 million of his own money, financing the rest. In that moment, he took control of over 10 million square feet of office space, the iconic observation deck, and the sprawling underground mall. It was the culmination of a lifelong ambition, a triumphant moment for a man who had bet his career on the enduring power of Manhattan. He had unknowingly placed himself and his fortune directly at the center of history. The weeks that followed were a blur of transition. Silverstein's team began the monumental task of taking over operations. They met with tenants, planned renovations, and started to implement their vision for a modernized complex. Life in the towers continued its daily, predictable rhythm. Tourists flocked to the observation deck, marveling at the panoramic views. Commuters rushed through the plaza, grabbing coffee on their way to their desks. It was business as usual, under skies that were still clear and blue. Silverstein himself settled into a new routine. Most mornings he would hold breakfast meetings with tenants and partners at Windows on the World, the breathtaking restaurant on the 107th floor of the North Tower. It was a routine that, by a simple twist of fate, he would break on one fateful Tuesday in September. But the most critical part of the deal was not the price tag or the square footage, it was the insurance. The lease agreement stipulated that Silverstein must insure the complex for no less than its full replacement value. He secured a policy for $3.55 billion. It was a complex arrangement spread across more than 20 different insurance companies. As August drew to a close, the final policy forms were still being negotiated and passed between lawyers. It was a detail lost in the mountain of paperwork, a standard clause in a colossal transaction. No one could have conceived that this very policy would soon become the focal point of an unprecedented legal war, or that the interpretation of a single word within it would be worth billions. The 99-year lease was a bet on the future. But the insurance policy was a safeguard against the unthinkable. And the unthinkable was just around the corner. This deal, a dream come true for a real estate mogul, was about to become a financial saga born from an American nightmare. A decision that would soon make him billions. The lease included insurance policies covering terrorist attacks, an uncommon precaution at the time. Weeks later, the world would change forever. On September 11, 2001, tragedy struck. The Twin Towers were destroyed, thousands of lives lost, and a city forever scarred. But for one man, the story was about to take a very different turn. In the smoldering ruins of Ground Zero, amidst the grief and chaos, a different kind of battle was already brewing. It wasn't one of rescue and recovery, but of contracts and clauses, a battle that would be fought not in the streets of New York, but in the hushed, wood-paneled boardrooms and courtrooms of the city's financial district. At the center of it all was Larry Silverstein, the man who had, just weeks earlier, secured the keys to the World Trade Center. Now, he stood as the leaseholder of the world's most infamous pile of rubble, holding an insurance policy worth an estimated $3.5 billion. For a city in mourning, the focus was on the human toll. For Silverstein and his insurers, the focus was shifting to the fine print. The policy, a complex web of agreements with over 20 different insurance companies, was designed to cover catastrophic loss. But the impending conflict would hinge on the interpretation of a single, seemingly innocuous word: occurrence. What constituted a single occurrence? For the insurers, the answer seemed obvious. The coordinated terrorist attack of September 11th was one tragic, unified event. One occurrence, one payout, capped at the policy limit of approximately $3.55 billion. But Silverstein and his formidable legal team, led by the legendary litigator Herbert Wachtell, saw it differently. They began to craft a novel, and, to many, an audacious argument. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, striking the North Tower at 8:46 a.m., was one event. The second plane, United Airlines Flight 175, crashing into the South Tower 17 minutes later, was a second, distinct, and separate event. Two planes, two impacts, two occurrences. This wasn't just a legal interpretation, it was a move that could potentially double the insurance payout from $3.55 billion to over $7 billion. The claim sent shockwaves through the global insurance industry. The consortium of insurers, led by giants like Swiss Re, were stunned. They viewed Silverstein's claim not as a legitimate legal dispute, but as an attempt to profit from a national tragedy. Their position was firm and unwavering. The 9/11's attacks were the result of a single, coordinated conspiracy hatched by Al-Qaeda. The two planes were merely the instruments of one singular horrific plot. To them, arguing for two occurrences was like claiming two bullets from the same gun constituted two separate assaults. The financial stakes were astronomical. A ruling in Silverstein's favor would represent one of the largest insurance payouts in history, a catastrophic loss that threatened the financial stability of some of the firms involved. The battle lines were drawn for a legal war of attrition that would last for years, pitting a determined developer against the titans of the insurance world. What followed was a grueling legal marathon that stretched for nearly 6 years. The case became a labyrinth of depositions, motions, and courtroom showdowns in federal court. The complexity was staggering, as Silverstein had to battle each insurer individually based on their specific policy language. The core of the dispute rested on which contract form was binding, a form provided by Silverstein's broker that did not define occurrence, or one from the insurers that defined it in a way that heavily favored a single event. The legal world watched captivated as Wachtel's team argued that two separate planes, causing separate damage at separate times, were clearly two events. The insurer's lawyers countered that it was the common cause that mattered, the single terrorist plot. In 2004, a federal jury handed Silverstein a major but incomplete victory. They found that for 9 of the insurers, the attacks did indeed constitute two occurrences, entitling Silverstein to a potential double payout from them. However, the war was far from over. In a separate trial concerning the primary insurer Swiss Re and other key players, a different jury reached the opposite conclusion. They sided with the insurance companies, ruling that for those policies the attack was a single event. The split decisions created a legal quagmire, a tangled mess of victories and defeats that left the final payout figure in limbo. With no clear final victory in sight for either side, and with immense public and political pressure mounting to begin rebuilding at ground zero, the warring parties moved from the courtroom to the negotiating table. The fight was over. One by one, over several years, settlements were reached. The legal maneuvering gave way to pragmatic compromise. When the dust finally settled in 2007, Larry Silverstein had secured a total of $4.55 billion from his insurers. It was not the $7 billion plus he had fought for, but it was $1 billion more than the insurers had initially insisted they owed. Silverstein maintained throughout that his fight was never about personal enrichment, but about securing the necessary funds to fulfill his obligation, to rebuild the World Trade Center and resurrect a symbol of American resilience from the ashes. The legacy of the insurance battle, however, is as complex as the legal arguments that defined it. To some, it represents a triumph of contractual law and a developer's unwavering determination to rebuild. To others, it remains a jarring footnote to a national catastrophe, a story of financial maneuvering in the shadow of immense human loss. The world watched as a city mourned, and in the background a war of words and wills raged over the definition of an occurrence. Eventually he received over $4.5 billion, billions from a tragedy that shook the world. In the aftermath of the unimaginable, as a nation grappled with its grief, the dust settled not into clarity but into a fog of lingering doubt. Amid the countless stories of heroism and loss, a different kind of narrative began to form, one woven from whispers, coincidences, and unsettling questions. At the center of this narrative stands one man, Larry Silverstein, the real estate developer who, just weeks before the attacks, secured the lease to the entire World Trade Center complex. For some, he is simply a shrewd businessman caught in the crossfire of history. For others, his story is riddled with too many improbabilities to be ignored. The official reports have been filed, the inquiries concluded. But for a persistent and vocal segment of the public, the most crucial questions remain unanswered. The most enduring point of contention revolves around a third skyscraper, the 47-story World Trade Center 7. It was not hit by a plane, yet at 5:20 p.m. on September 11th, it fell, collapsing into its own footprint with a speed and symmetry that stunned observers. For years the cause was a mystery, fueling speculation. Then, a 2002 PBS documentary, America Rebuilds, aired an interview with Larry Silverstein that would become the cornerstone of countless conspiracy theories. In it, he described the chaos of the day and a fateful decision made regarding the heavily damaged and fire-ravaged Building 7. He recalled a conversation with the fire department commander, who said they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. Silverstein stated, "I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life, maybe the smartest thing to do is just pull it." 2 words that ignited a firestorm. To skeptics, the phrase was a smoking gun, an admission of a controlled demolition. In demolition terminology, to pull a building is to bring it down with strategically placed explosives. The implication was terrifying. If the building was pulled, it meant the collapse was intentional, requiring extensive preparation that could not have happened in a single afternoon. It suggested foreknowledge. Silverstein and his defenders have vehemently refuted this interpretation, clarifying that pull it was slang for pulling the team of firefighters out of the building, a decision to withdraw life-saving personnel before an imminent uncontrolled collapse. The official investigation by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, later concluded that the building fell due to uncontrolled fires, making it the first steel-framed high-rise ever to do so. Yet for critics, the official explanation feels incomplete. The speed, the symmetry, the words of the leaseholder himself, they all combine into a puzzle that for many has never been solved. The controversy doesn't end there. One must rewind just a few weeks, to July 24, 2001. This was the day Silverstein Properties finalized a 99-year lease on the World Trade Center, a $3.2 billion deal that was the largest real estate transaction in New York City's history. As part of the deal, Silverstein took out an extensive insurance policy. Crucially, this policy specifically covered acts of terrorism. In the wake of the attacks, a complex and highly publicized legal battle ensued. Silverstein's lawyers argued that because two separate planes struck the towers, they were two separate occurrences, entitling him to a double payout, a staggering $7 billion. The insurers countered that the coordinated attack was a single event. After years of litigation, the courts largely sided with Silverstein, who was eventually awarded a settlement of approximately $4.55 billion. To his supporters, it was a demonstration of brilliant legal strategy and the funds necessary to fulfill his obligation to rebuild. To his detractors, the timing of the lease and the nature of the insurance claim seemed like a coincidence of astronomical proportions, a financial motive that was too significant to overlook. Beyond the financial questions, others point to Silverstein's deep and long-standing connections within the spheres of politics and finance. As a major figure in New York real estate, his influence was undeniable, with close personal ties to governors, mayors, and global financial leaders. Speculation arose about hidden knowledge and secret agendas. Could a man so well connected have been privy to intelligence that wasn't available to the public? This theory gained traction when reports surfaced of unusual trading activity on the stock market in the days leading up to September 11th. A surge in put options, bets that a company's stock will fall, were placed on United and American Airlines, the two carriers involved in the attacks. The 9/11's Commission investigated these trades and concluded they found no evidence linking them to Al-Qaeda. But they didn't investigate any other possibilities, leaving the door open for theories that someone else, someone with foreknowledge, was trying to profit from the impending tragedy. Perhaps the most personal and striking coincidence is the story of why Larry Silverstein is alive to tell his tale at all. He had a daily routine, a breakfast meeting at the windows on the World Restaurant, located on the 107th floor of the North Tower. He was scheduled to be there on the morning of September 11th, but that morning, his wife Clara insisted he keep a dermatologist appointment he had been meaning to cancel. It was a simple domestic intervention that saved his life. His two children, who also worked at the World Trade Center, were also running late that day and were spared. A stroke of incredible fortune, a miracle, or, as the darkest theories suggest, a convenient excuse. The pull-it statement, the 11th hour lease, the multi-billion-dollar insurance claim, the powerful connections, the canceled meeting. Taken individually, each can be explained away as coincidence, slang, or good fortune. But when woven together, they create a tapestry of doubt that, for many, obscures the official narrative. Is this the story of a man who made the deal of a lifetime only to see it turn into a nightmare? Who narrowly escaped death and then fought to rebuild? Or are the shadows that fall over ground zero hiding a more complex and disturbing truth? What really happened behind the scenes? The official record is written, but the questions endure, echoing in the space where the towers once stood. Larry Silverstein emerged financially unscathed from a tragedy that devastated thousands. His billions, timing, and connections leave us asking, coincidence, or part of something far greater?